The topic that I will be presenting is managing absenteeism. Absenteeism is when an employee does not come in for their scheduled shifts and calls off prior to that shift. It can either be voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary means that the healthcare professional takes a day off to work on personal errands, and involuntary means the professional has no control over being absent. For example, being sick or having a sick child or having to go to a doctor's appointment for a chronic illness. Reasons for absenteeism include lack of self-scheduling, not honoring days requested, personal illness, family-related issues, unreliable transportation, weather-related, or motivation to attend. Now, some of these reasons aren't credible or valid, like unreliable transportation. You know far in advance that you have a scheduled shift. So if you call off on the day of and say, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it to work because I don't have transportation. Now, obviously things can come up, but most times what is the motivation to attend for that employee if the morning of they're stating that they can't find transportation? Another reason, lack of self-scheduling. Those units that do not participate in this could potentially see more nurses or employees calling off of work if they're not able to have those days off that they need off. So for example, on my unit, we can request our days, which are personal days off that we need off on the schedule. So when we put these days into the schedule, they are honored because we have something going on and cannot come into work. Most time the unit is very good about scheduling off on these days, and we have 6 per pay period, which works out very nice. So that video included some of the 10 reasons for absenteeism in the local workforce. Here I added some humor into the video. Now I will be going into absence culture. Absence culture refers to the general attitude toward intolerance of absenteeism, which can also influence employee attendance and motivation. Some units are more laid back when it comes to call-offs and others are too strict. Where is the balance? So on some units, there can be this culture where they are very strict and 2 call-offs in 1 month and you're automatically fired. Now, I don't know every policy for every job, but that's just an example. Or you can have units that are so laid back because they can't retain their staff, that the nurses that they do have, they don't mind them calling off because they need them to work when they do come in, whenever they do come in. So we need to find that balance of being not too strict, but also not being too laid back, whereas we can have employee satisfaction and we have employees coming into work because they like what they do and the environment is a good place to be. So from a nursing and manager standpoint, how can we manage absenteeism? I think the most important thing is finding the root cause of absenteeism and to make sure that it's not organizational related or related to the work environment. So as if I were the manager, I would say being personable with employees and to see what's affecting them at their home life, because you truly don't know what people are going through. And even the ones that show up every day to work could be going through a lot of things. And I just think as a manager, it's very important to know what's going on with your employees. Obviously, we can't change everything that's going on for our employees, but turning that caring ear on and having that open door policy to your office, I think is very important for the culture that you have on your unit. I think it makes a difference in your employees and how your team reacts to each other and just how they interact with other employees and other situations. Another thing is some units are naturally more short-staffed. For example, night shift is typically always more short-staffed. So how can we promote a culture of support for these employees? Because we know that they're going to be experiencing more frustrations, less staff to help them during the night, and still having the same staffing ratio as day shift. So what can we do to make these employees feel satisfied in their job and not having to call off to take that personal day because of them being exhausted from their previous shift? Another thing with managing absenteeism is, are we providing our nurses and employees fair compensation? If our nurses aren't being paid to what they're supposed to be getting paid, then they really don't have that motivation to come into work because they can say, you know what, I'm going to call off today. It does not matter if I'm going to be fired because, you know what, I'm not even getting paid what I'm supposed to be getting paid. Now, obviously, that's a poor attitude to have, but it is also a very realistic one if the job market is fluctuating and you see other nurses in other hospitals getting paid more for the same work. Another thing for managing call-offs is employee dinners and get-togethers. What are you doing in your environment, on your unit, to retain your employees and to just foster that team building within your employees? Are we doing potluck dinners? Are we doing get-togethers? Are we doing breakfasts? Just things that make the staff feel positive about their job and feel like someone cares about them. Also, are we rewarding good behaviors in our nurses? So are we looking up to those nurses who have that good morale, who don't call off of work, who are always having positive behavior? Because if we don't, then it's like, you know you're supposed to be doing a good job at work, but if it's not recognized ever, then it's almost seen as a negative thing. And also from a manager's standpoint, what type of nurses are you hiring? Even if you are short-staffed and you're filling 3 positions, we're not just going to hire any nurse to fill that position. We want to hire quality nurses so that we can retain that staff and so that the nurses that we are hiring are a good addition to the team so that we don't have the same cycle of behaviors occurring. Another thing is injury prevention. So making sure that when the nurses do come into work, we have all of the equipment we need for them so that they're not getting hurt on the job and having to use FEMLA or taking days off. So what is your experience with absenteeism? Do you think nurses face more call-off days due to the nature of their job? Nurses have high acuity patients. We work understaffed sometimes. Sometimes we do not feel supported in our environment. We can be physically exhausted from working 12 to 13-hour shifts. Nurse burnout within our unit and patient to staff ratios. So as a manager and as a nurse, it's important that we know what is going on our unit so we can see how it's affecting our patients, how it's affecting our nursing staff, and how we can improve upon it, because nurses, as we all know, have direct impact on our patient care. So if our nurses aren't striving, our patients are not able to strive either in that environment that we're putting them in. So I think it's very important that we are looking at both sides of that spectrum. So for workplace policies, the biggest thing is how can we combat call-offs? In Sullivan, the book, they stated an innovative approach for managing absenteeism is for substituting personal days for unused sick days. So say you have 5 unused days because you weren't sick that year. Would it be okay if we use them as personal days and you would still be able to get paid? Also, including absences as part of yearly evaluations. Not as a like, hey, you called off 6 times, but hey, this is our policy at work. I just want to make sure that you're aware of it and that you know that you can come to me if things are not looking right with your schedule, or you need time off, or you need to decrease your FTE. I think it's very important to have that open door policy with your manager so that you're constantly evaluating your position, your FTE, and your hours to make sure that you're having that good work-life balance. For example, I had a situation where I was working full-time and I was going to school full-time as well, and it was becoming too much. And I was noticing that I was having some of those early symptoms of nurse burnout. I was not motivated to go to work because I had so much going on with school and vice versa. So I made that decision to drop some of my hours at work just so I could have more of that work-life balance. And it really made a difference. Now, I know not everyone can do that, but it is an example that some people do end up doing for short-term solutions. Another policy is making sure that our employees are knowledgeable about FMLA, which protects the employee of their jobs due to chronic illnesses, pregnancy, or anything else where they require to be off of work for an extended period of time and that they don't lose their job because of it. So in conclusion, managing absenteeism is very important due to the cascade effect it can have on units. Most times absenteeism can result from problems on the unit, nurse burnout, short-staffed, retention of new nurses, and having an unhealthy work environment. Obviously, sometimes calling off of work is necessary. You don't want to go into work if you have the flu, or if you have a fever, if you have a rash, or if you're contagious. Those are good days, that you should stay home for. But a lot of times when we see increased call-offs in the unit, we need to take a step back and see what is going on and how we can change that so that we can retain our nurses and have a healthy work environment.